This is Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth, for competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty, for the Republic.
I'm the guy who at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meatpackers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Klayman, special prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to this week's edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. As I always say, it's not repetitive. Another important show. We need to really educate the American people on what's going on, not just in Washington, D.C., but around the country. In our court system, that's something which is near and dear to me. I am an ideologue. I do believe in our justice system, but our justice system is more than broken. It's become a cesspool of corruption. And there are very few lawyers in this country that will say that. I will say that. I paid a price for saying that with a number of different entities, because lawyers are supposed to basically toe the line. They're not to say anything. They're to rake in money. They're to represent themselves more than their clients. In fact, that's what most lawyers do. Yours truly has never done that. I put the client first. I don't put my own interest first. In fact, Joseph Farah, the great founder of WorldNet Daily, once said in an interview with the Washington Post, they did a cover story on me, Larry Klayman versus everyone. The one thing about Larry Klayman is that he doesn't always do what's in his self-interest. I want to do what's in the interest of the country. My self-interest is secondary. And if I couldn't do what I would think is right, if I can't say what I think is true, then I don't want to be a lawyer. And I reached that point in 1994 when I founded Judicial Watch. I had seen a lot of corruption, particularly on the federal judiciary. I had experienced a judge in Los Angeles, California, in the Central District by the name of William D. Keller, who was an anti-Semite. He was a bigot. He was also someone that simply was alcoholic. He had a lot of other problems. And I went through a 6-week trial. I almost went bankrupt. And he ruled against my client in large part, and then tried me at the end of the case because I challenged his impartiality. I took the matter up on appeal. Federal judges in Washington wouldn't listen to it. Eventually, Judge Kaczynski, who since had to resign from the Ninth Circuit, he was actually the best judge up there, in fact, in terms of his ability as a judge and his integrity in terms of ethics. He ordered an investigation and the transcript of what Keller had said. He made various bigoted remarks. He called me Mr. Schmuckler. He made fun of my Taiwanese client, of the gay retailer, of a Jewish client, and that transcript went missing. It could be a John Grisham novel. In fact, the court reporter turned up dead. It was after that that I said to myself, when I can afford it, because Keller fined me $20,000 after that case. I had very little money in those days. I had spent 6 weeks defending a Taiwanese businessman in a patent and trademark case in front of Judge Keller. And the irony of the thing is, after I put my neck on the line for this client, the client fled. He never paid me for my services, and I almost went over. I had to borrow $100,000 from the bank just to stay afloat. You can read about that in my book, Whores, Why and How I Came to Fight the Establishment, which you can still find at Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com and WorldNetDaily.com. They have copies of it to this day. It's my autobiography. And that's what caused me to start Judicial Watch. I was walking down the street in Georgetown, living in Washington at the time, and I said, what will you call this organization to watch judges? And I thought of it, Judicial Watch. It obviously makes sense, watching judges. Later, the great investigative journalist Bill Safire, who worked in the Nixon administration, Freudian slip, they both were impeached, told me he thought that was a really great name. So the justice system has been near and dear to my heart as a lawyer for many, many years, and you can read about it in my book, Whores, and you can find more about my writings at WorldNetDaily.com, and when I was writing for Newsmax blog, that's also on our website. I don't write for Newsmax anymore. They become very, very middle of the road and political. and they censor stuff, frankly. And WorldNet Daily does not. They let me write what I need to write, and I'll also publish it myself on other websites. But the bottom line is this, is that our federal judicial system has become a corrupt cesspool. And I will say that judges may not like that. There are some exceptions to that, but frankly, very few. When you're dealing with a political case and you're dealing with maybe a hot potato issue in the social area like abortion, these judges make very political decisions. And I was on Crowdsource the Truth about a week ago. You can find my appearance at the Freedom Watch YouTube channel. I urge you to watch it as well. And with this radio show, which I also broadcast out on podcast as well as Radio America, I will attach that Crowdsource the Truth appearance. Because here's what you need to understand about federal judges. You can almost gauge with exact certainty how they're going to rule based upon the president that appointed them. And when President Trump made reference to that, when a judge by the name of John Tiger enjoined his asylum policy, which was to limit illegal immigration, Tiger being in the Northern District of California, that district court in San Francisco, and Trump remarked, well, this was another Obama judge that did this, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Roberts, chastised Trump, made fun of him, and said, no, we're all independent. We never decide things on politics. We're not Obama judges. We're not Clinton judges. We're not Bush judges. We are holier than thou. We're pure. Well, that's not true. And let me give you a couple examples just in the last few weeks. And even the judges that I like, they play politics, and they put their interest ahead of the American people. Now, there were 3 decisions that came out in 2 weeks, 3 dismissals of my cases at Freedom Watch, and I've taken 2 of them on appeal. One, I've shoved it right back in front of the judge that dismissed it. Let's talk about the case of Jerry Corsi against Robert Mueller. The judge, a Clinton appointee, Judge Helen Siegel-Uvel, dismissed the case primarily because she claimed that I could not prove that Robert Mueller ordered his prosecutors to threaten Corsi with indictment if he didn't lie and implicate the president. And I said to her at an oral argument, who do you think ordered it? He's head of the office. You'd have to live on Pluto if you don't believe that. And I pled it. And that's all you have to do at the beginning of a case. Then you get into discovery and you get evidence and you can prove it up. And she responds, well, I guess I live on Mars. Well, she was looking for a way out. And in fact, I predicted that to Dr. Corsi before we went into the oral argument. So sure enough, she dismissed the case to protect her fellow benefactors, her fellow buddies in Washington, D.C., people like Robert Mueller. You know, the elite, Democrat and Republican, they protect each other because there, by the grace of God, go thee. Let's keep stuffing money into our pockets. Let's keep enriching ourselves, building power. You should see the building that's going on in Washington. Where does all this money come from? Why is Washington getting bigger and bigger and bigger? Why do we need more government? Why do we need more of everything? It's sucking the country dry of its resources, and there's no reason for Washington, D.C. to be as huge as it is and continue to grow. But it is, because everybody's part of this huge club stuffing money into their pockets as well as power. Then there was the case of Sheriff Joe Arpaio. This is the flip side of the coin. A judge that I've admired for many years, who did many good things when I ran Judicial Watch, and thereafter Judge Royce Lamberth. I made reference to him many, many times. But I got to tell you, if you go look and buy my book, Whores, you'll see that I was critical of Judge Lamberth in those days, during the Clinton years, because he could have put Hillary Clinton away. He never would give me her deposition in the number of cases that I brought, particularly the Filegate lawsuit. That was when the Clintons got 900 FBI files of their adversaries, obviously to intimidate them, to get dirt on them, to smear them, much like the mass surveillance that goes on today by the deep state. He never would put Hillary Clinton away. And we also had the first Hillary Clinton email scandal. There was a criminal contempt hearing on that, evidentiary trial in effect. And at the time I left Judicial Watch, Judge Lamberth hadn't made a ruling. 2 years later, he sat on this thing, being quite content that he had damaged the Clintons enough that George W. Bush was elected. That's my view. And he dismissed that as well. He did many good things in the interim. You know, he allowed me to take depositions. He allowed to get some truth out, but he never went for the home run pitch. And I was critical of that. And after those cases ended, and I no longer had cases in front of Judge Lamberth, I would go in and talk to him. I won't reveal, my conversations with him, but, I thanked him for what he did. And, I realized that of all the federal judges out there, he had done the most, but it wasn't enough. So back to Arpaio. Arpaio brings a lawsuit against CNN, the Huffington Post, and Rolling Stone for defaming him as a convicted felon. By the grace of God, I think, it gets assigned to Judge Lamberth. We ultimately have an oral argument. The defendants claim that I didn't plead specificity with enough. I didn't plead malice, because you have to have malice for a public figure for a defamation case to proceed, with enough specificity. And I told Lamberth, I did plead it with enough specificity, Your Honor, but with your leave of court, I'll make it even more detailed. Fast forward. Months later, he didn't rule. He was sitting on it. And ultimately, just the other day, he dismisses the case, claiming that there wasn't enough specificity. I'd asked him to leave, to amend, is to be freely granted, but he dismisses it with prejudice. But at the same time, he tries to do Arpaio a favor, saying, well, Arpaio was defamed. The statements weren't substantially true, and he was damaged. But he didn't have the guts to let the case go forward. And I think the reason was he got cold feet. He realizes that he's going to make some tough decisions with regard to some other cases in the future, and he didn't want to be vilified and smeared by these same liberal leftist fake news media. That's my take on it. Okay, I don't know that for a fact. But it was very disillusioning. So what did I do? I recrafted the complaint, and I shoved it right back in front of him yesterday evening. It now has the specificity. You asked for it, Judge Lamberth. You got it, Toyota. But it shook me up because the one judge I had confidence in the district court in Washington, D.C., bailed out, in my view, for political or other reasons. Now, when I come back, I'm going to talk about another case that's involving Laurie Loon. Same thing. This is not sour grapes. This is what I've been experiencing for all of my career and why I started Judicial Watch and now started Freedom Watch and run that. I'll be right back with the second segment of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman.
Dangerous.
You don't hear, use the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad.
Special Prosecutor
Very bad.
Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
Ladies and gentlemen, fellow patriots, those who actually believe in the rule of law and the Constitution, let me give you example number 3. Just yesterday, a ruling was issued by a Judge Dabney Friedrich. She's a female judge, a Trump appointee, previously worked for establishment Republican Senator Orrin Hatch, worked as a law clerk to establishment Judge Thomas Hogan, also Republican, in D.C. in the federal court, and also for the George W. Bush White House as one of his in-house White House counsel. Very political. Now, how do you get a federal judgeship? You either donate a lot of money. There's one judge in particular who got a judgeship under Obama, actually gave $38,000 of his own money, and his mega law firm in Washington, D.C., donated hundreds of thousands of dollars. They got 2 judges on the bench. Obviously, that helps to get clients. It also helps when you have cases in front of the court. Because, see, judges never find that they have a conflict of interest. Maybe a lawyer does, but they never have one, practically speaking. In any event, this Judge Dabney Friedman dismissed a lawsuit by Laurie Loon. We had her on the show before. Now, who is Laurie Loon? Laurie Loon is the woman who was most viciously sexually abused by Roger Ailes, former disgraced and now deceased founder and CEO of Fox News. Laurie Loon was featured on the first 5 episodes of a Showtime series called Loudest Voice, which was written by Gabe Sherman. And Laurie Loon was depicted correctly, because I've talked to Laurie Loon, she's my client. She was depicted as the primary woman who was destroyed by Roger Ailes. She was intimidated. She was forced to have sex with him. She was forced to have oral sex with him. It was all depicted there. And how was it covered up? It was covered up by Roger Ailes' top brass. And who were they? Bill Shine, who later got a job in the White House. That didn't last. He's now working on the Trump presidential campaign, who was essentially Roger Ailes' chief of staff at Fox News, and a woman by the name of Suzanne Scott, who actually was a facilitator of Ailes' sexual abuse of Laurie Loon and the other women. In fact, Suzanne Scott would actually get hotel rooms where Roger would meet Laurie Loon and force himself upon her. Now, I'm not judgmental here, but the fact is that Laurie Loon was destroyed. She's tried to commit suicide twice. She has PTSD. She is a basket case. So I filed a case against Fox News and Suzanne Scott because Suzanne Scott, right before the show Loudest Voice in a Room was broadcast on Showtime, it was a 7-part miniseries a couple months ago, Fox News wanted to blunt the fallout from that show because it showed how Suzanne Scott, Bill Shine, and others covered up what Roger Ailes had done, not just to Laurie Loon, but many other women over there with abusive behavior, with sexual, perversion and whatever else you want to call it. But the fact is that they had to blunt that. So Suzanne Scott did an interview with the LA Times where she denied knowing anything about what was going on. Now, Laurie Loon had already been out there, and she had been talking about Suzanne Scott and what happened at Fox News. So that was the equivalent of branding my client, Laurie Loon, a liar. So we brought a case for defamation. It was assigned to this new Trump appointee, Dabney Friedrich. We also gave her the episodes where Laurie Loon was showcased on Showtime, and it verified exactly what happened with regard to the cover-up by Suzanne Scott and that she had lied when she talked to the LA Times. Well, Friedrich sat on this case for many, many months, despite my asking to have an oral argument, despite telling her that my client was still in a suicidal state and needed justice, because justice delayed is justice denied. And yesterday she issued an opinion in this case. We're going to talk about it in some detail when we come back in the context of these other cases. And she dismissed the case callously and did it on phony grounds. So this is what we're dealing with in the federal judiciary. They're very political. See, as a Trump judge, I believe she was concerned in protecting Fox News because Fox News, of all the networks, it's gone left lately, but it's still more supportive of President Trump, her benefactor, than any other cable news network. Not more supportive, say, than Sinclair, which isn't cable, but they have local stations. But this is a problem in the judiciary. I want you to understand this because the Founding Fathers were enlightened by God, but they weren't God, and they made major mistake in how we appoint federal judges and in devising methods to try to remove them when they stray from the law and the Constitution. I'm going to be right back. Until then, go to freedomwatchusa.org, donate to our Judicial Selection Strike Force so we can get better judges, and also donate to us because we are the mouse that roared. We are your Justice Department. I'll be right back with the third segment of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
And let me explain to you, ladies and gentlemen, patriots, supporters of Freedom Watch, of Larry Klayman and what I do, and supporters of others who are seeking to preserve our democracy and our republic and the rule of law. And why do we need to do that? Because in the days leading up to the American Revolution, to the Declaration of Independence, which was signed in my birthplace of Philadelphia, King George III had taken our legal system, our criminal justice system, back to England. He had yes men on the bench, and he basically terrorized the American colonies, not just with regard to his British troops breaking into our homes, seizing our guns, but through decisions that were being made in his courts that harmed us irreparably. And this was the catalyst for declaring a new country, a new nation, a nation of laws and not men. That's what John Adams advocated to the Continental Congress when, in fact, we created a new country and declared independence on July 4th, 1776, and then, of course, enacted a constitution in 1789. That is the premise upon which I believe in our justice system, not in the way it is, but the way it should be. And Adams wanted it that way. Jefferson wanted it that way. Franklin wanted it that way. But it was Jefferson who said, we're going to have a revolution every other generation because we're going to get corrupt. That's the nature of mankind. Now, I'm trying to avoid that. And who are our protectors of our Constitution and our Republic? They're the federal judges. They were put in place by our founding fathers to protect we the people against the tyranny of the other two branches of government and the tyranny among ourselves. But when the federal judiciary sells out to political and other interests, we are left defenseless. And the only other option is to wage a revolution as we did in 1776. Now, I don't want to see that because that revolution was bloody. It was violent. Jefferson actually predicted we would have more bloody revolutions. In fact, he was an architect of the French Revolution as well, which was extremely bloody, much more than our revolution, which was more like a civil war with Britain. The French Revolution was really brutal. And I believe that we're headed to that if we do not have a judiciary that will stand in the stead for the American people, because then we are exposed to the tyranny of the other two branches of government. And if these judges fail to do their jobs, and I say this rhetorically, I don't say it actually, but if a revolution breaks out, those who should be first taken to the guillotines are the federal judges. I don't mean that should happen, but I'm saying that in a poetic way, because they are our most important public servants. People think, and judges think, that I criticize them unfairly, that I vilify them. No, that's because I actually believe in their role as judges, and they're not doing it. Now, let me tell you, let's get back to Dabney Friedrich and also Judge Uvell with regard to the Mueller case that Corsi brought for trying to coerce him to suborn perjury, for violating grand jury secrecy rules, which is criminal, and for illegal surveillance, which is also criminal. There's a case that issued out of the Supreme Court some years ago called Bell Atlantic versus Twombly. And I cited an article that I've written in WorldNet Daily this weekend. I want you to go to freedomwatchusa.org and read that. The Supreme Court said in dicta, it doesn't mean that it's the holding of the case, but they just said this in passing, that federal judges can dismiss a case if the allegations of the complaint are not plausible. Well, that was not the basis upon which our founding fathers created the jury system. It was meant to take the power away from federal judges and give it to the hands of the people. It's not for a judge to decide what's plausible or not. It's for the jury to decide that. And that's why what the founding fathers did in our Constitution was so unique, because in England you only were able to have juries for felony criminal matters, not for civil matters. In our country, for most civil matters, you're entitled to a jury because the founding fathers did not trust the judges, not King George's judges. They were yes men. They didn't have women judges in those days, unfortunately, but they were yes men, and they were the lackeys of the British crown. So that's what is being used. Let me tell you what's being used by these judges to dismiss cases that they want to dismiss for their political purposes or because it's a hot potato in their courtroom, and they don't want to be criticized. They don't want to lose their membership in the Washington, D.C. Swamp Club, and they want to be able to continue on, the clubs in other state capitals and around the country as well. They want to continue on as the establishment judges that they are. You might call them politicians in robes, as I've called them, and not have to face the music for making tough decisions. So they take this dicta in Twombly and say that if a case is not plausible, they step in and they act as if they're God and get rid of it. And that's what Friedrich did to protect Fox News, because she knows that she was appointed by Trump. She's a political person. She's the product of the Republican establishment. You know, Trump got the names of these judges from Don McGahn. He was White House counselor, from Federalist Society, from the Washington establishment. Well, stamp, okay, approved. He didn't know who he was appointing. The poor guy has so many problems, he can't keep track of everything. But what he appointed were Republican establishment politicians in robes that have, and the ones I've been up in front of so far, none of them have the guts to do what needs to be done. They want to go along to get along. They don't want aggravation. They want to be accepted in the judicial community. So Friedrich dismisses this case on the grounds that it wasn't plausible that people that read the LA Times article where Suzanne Scott was quoted, current CEO of Fox News. She was obviously appointed after Ailes had to resign because they needed a woman for cover, given all the sexual abuse towards women. She also knew where all the female bodies were buried because she was covering it up for Ailes, along with Bill Shine. But she says that we didn't show that the average reader would know that Suzanne Scott was talking about Laurie Loon. So I submitted affidavits from 2 Hollywood producers that said, well, we knew what Suzanne Scott was talking about. We knew she was defaming Laurie Loon when she said that she had no knowledge of this cover-up by Ailes of the sexual abuse. And I also submitted the 7-part miniseries to her, excerpts of Loudest Voice, showing that Laurie Loon was enabled to be sexually abused at Ailes' hands by Suzanne Scott. She ignores all that and just dismisses it. Well, yes, we've taken an appeal already. I've taken appeal of the Uvell dismissal of the Mueller case. I've shoved the complaint back in front of Royce Lamberth. But I'm doing what I can to try to bring about justice in this country. We need to reform how we choose judges. You know how they're chosen now? I've said this before. The political patronage. A judge comes from a large law firm, say Wilmer Hale, for instance, where Mueller comes from. And Wilmer Hale has 2 judges on the bench right now. These judges donate a lot of money themselves to the state senator that recommends them to the president. They donate money to the president. They're large law firms, corporations, labor unions, or whatever special interest group they come from, donate hundreds of thousands of dollars frequently. In the case of these 2 judges on the D.C. court right now, Wilmer Hale bundled hundreds of thousands of dollars, in my view, to get them their job. One judge that was nominated and confirmed gave $38,000 of his own money to Democrat candidates during the Obama years and previous to that. Judgeships are bought. They're bought and sold. There are very few judges that get through on the basis of merit. I know, because I had actually wanted to be U.S. attorney at one point in Miami when I was a young lawyer. I went through the same process that judges have to go through in terms of the vetting process to possibly be named as U.S. attorney by Bush the dad. Well, Bush the dad named the college roommate of Jeb Bush as U.S. attorney at the time. He didn't last long because H.W. Bush lost the next election within months. But it's the same process. In fact, Senator Connie Mack said to me at the time, his staff, Larry, you're not going to be U.S. attorney because we're going to nominate Jeb Bush's roommate. That was what they intimated. But would you like to be considered to be a federal judge? I said, no, I'm an advocate. I don't want to be a judge. I don't want to be neutral. I'm a gladiator. I'm a fighter. Okay? But that's how it works. It's political patronage. And in the case of Dabney Friedrich, for instance, read my WorldNet Daily story, she knew all the right people. She knew Orrin Hatch, who was head of the Judiciary Committee, Utah senator, Republican establishment, who's been involved in his own scandals, BCCI. She worked for George W. Bush in the White House. She worked for Thomas Hogan, an establishment federal judge who wrongfully transferred a case by Judge Roy Moore several months ago to New York. Actually, the judge I got, I think, is better than Hogan, and he's an Obama appointee, interestingly enough. He seems like a very fair man so far. We'll see. But the reality is this, is that we have politicians on the federal bench, and that's very, very dangerous. Because if we don't have people that actually make decisions based on the rule of law, it shouldn't be which judge was appointed by which president to be able to gauge whether they're going to rule in your favor or not. And I've just now basically strongly criticized both Republican-appointed and Democrat-appointed federal judges. But we need to devise a new system. And in the show next week, I'm going to propose a new system for selecting federal judges, which may take a constitutional amendment. But for now, I want you all to think about it. I want you to read the column that I wrote last week in WorldNet Daily and this week. That's it. And you can find that at freedomwatchusa.org. Because without good judges, we, the American people, will have no choice but to rise up as we did in 1776 when the heat in the kitchen gets too hot for us because the establishment is keeping us down through political hacks that they put on the bench. And that's why I'm trying to file as many cases as I can in state court these days, because at least state court judges, generally speaking, can be removed. You know, usually you vote them in, but if they don't do a good job or they do something that's inappropriate, you can vote them out. In our federal system, it's virtually impossible to impeach a judge the way it works. One of the last judges that was impeached was Judge Alice Hastings in Miami, Florida, my home state. When he was impeached, he later ran for Congress and won. He's been a congressman ever since. So this is what we're dealing with in the capital of corruption, which I now call the cesspool of corruption. And it's what we're dealing with throughout the various circuits in the United States. Now, that's not going to win me friends and influence people on the judiciary, but someone needs to tell the truth. And it's not just a question of judicial activism. It's a question of judicial integrity. And Chief Justice John Roberts, who's moved left in recent years, continues to live in a dream world. He should be Chief Justice of the Supreme Court on Pluto, not on this earth. He's a product of the establishment. He's the one that gave us Obamacare. He's the one who's made other decisions recently, moving this court far left. But I don't take issue with political ideology because you shouldn't have a political ideology on the bench. You should do things neutrally and fairly and interpret the law as it is. And why do all journalists of all political persuasions, left, right, or center, always tell you what president appointed that judge in analyzing a decision? Because they know that politics enters into it. And so when Roberts said that we're neutral judges, we're not Clinton judges, we're not Obama judges, we're not Bush judges, that was plain bullshit. It was lying to the American people. And when the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court lies to the American people and puts his head in the sand, then the people lose confidence in our justice system. Now, I'm going to be back with the next segment, a special prosecutor with Larry Klayman. But I want to tell you why you need good judges. It's because of clients like Cliven Bundy, who were railroaded in a political prosecution. Now, that judge, Gloria Navarro, ultimately dismissed the indictment in the middle of the trial, not because she was trying to do the right thing. She hated the Bundys. She hated me. She's an ultra-leftist. But she didn't want to go down with the ship with a Justice Department that was lying to her, which was suborning perjury, where a whistleblower came forward that was about to testify on the kill list on the heads of the Bundys. Also hiding of exculpatory evidence known as Brady material. So, and then what happens after that? The Trump Justice Department takes an appeal, the Trump Justice Department. And if we don't win that appeal, and I urge you to go to ClivenBundyDefenseFund.org and donate to his defense, it's a private defense, then he'll be back in court, and he and his sons and the other defendants could face the prospect of life imprisonment again if they don't win. This is our justice system today, ladies and gentlemen, federal prosecutors. We don't have a justice system. It's worse than in 1776, believe me, because there's the hypocritical lie that's being told by the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and others, that we have a system that's neutral, that's fair. It is not neutral. It is not fair. I don't care what persuasion you are in terms of race, color, religion, sexual preference, or otherwise. Our justice system is an absolute cesspool. I'll be right back with the verdict section of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're back with the verdict section of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. We at Freedom Watch and Larry Klayman personally in my private practice are attempting to bring about justice. We use hard-hitting cases. We use citizen grand juries. We use many other means to try to accomplish our purpose. We bring Freedom of Information Act cases like my former group, Judicial Watch. You never lose a Freedom of Information Act case. You'll always get documents, which is why Tom Fitton's always crowing about another Judicial Watch victory. But Larry Klayman takes risks. I've never been scared to lose, because if you're scared to lose, you'll never win. And right now, we have no choice. We have to try to win in court and otherwise if we're going to prevent a violent revolution in this country, which I don't want to see. But that's why I bring as many cases, because even if you win 1 in 10, that's a good record given these federal judges, notwithstanding the fact that now I'm going into state court much more. And in Florida, in particular, they allow cases to go forward and go to a jury and actually get a real decision by we the people. And we'll be using courts in other jurisdictions, much, much more in the state level. But we really need your support and we need your help because citizens' grand juries are going to be coming up. We're going to seek the indictment of Joe Biden and his son Hunter. Robert Mueller, he's already been indicted. We're going to have him tried. Hillary Clinton, Lisa Page, Peter Strzok, Bruce Orr, Brennan Clapper. Forget about Brennan and Clapper. We have leaks now coming out of our compromised Justice Department, which is a complete fraud under Bill Barr. He's not the Messiah, the legal Messiah, that they're now going to indict Brennan and Clapper. You've got Joe DeGeneva, who I like, and his wife Victoria saying heads are going to roll. People are going to be disciplined. No, they're not going to be disciplined. In the Justice Department, nobody's ever disciplined. They protect their own. I'm former Justice Department alumnus. I know what goes on over there, and you know what goes on in there. You haven't seen any discipline. You haven't seen an indictment of Andrew McCabe in the FBI. That's part of the Justice Department. 2 times the Attorney General had the ability to indict Comey. He passed. Forget about it. It's just for show. It's for history. These reports of the Inspector General, even if he recommends criminal prosecution, doesn't happen. So you have to rely on a group like Freedom Watch to get the job done. And I hope that you'll go to freedomwatchusa.org and contribute to our cause. We need to get bigger. Judicial Watch has $110 million in net worth if you go look at their 990s on their website. We don't have that, but we're doing the heavy lifting. We're not just doing FOIA cases primarily. We are doing the heavy lifting, so we need your help. I do today at Freedom Watch what I used to do at Judicial Watch. I left them with $20 million when I left to run for the U.S. Senate in 2003. With $20 million in the bank, it takes money to make money, and they finally have figured out how to do that. But the money needs to be used in a way that will actually bring about justice. Getting documents does not bring about justice, because if you're not going to bring cases yourself, hard-hitting cases or citizens' grand juries, and rely on the Justice Department, forget it. It's not going to happen under any administration. Now, talking about the Justice Department, just this week, former Attorney General Jeff Sessions, if you can believe this, says that he's going to run for the U.S. Senate again in Alabama, and he's going to run against my client, Chief Justice Roy Moore, who is a man of integrity. Of all the judges I have known in my lifetime, he's the only judge that will do things purely on principle, will not compromise, and do what he thinks right, whether it's the 10 Commandments or whether it's gay marriage. You don't have to be anti-gay to believe that the state should decide the issue of whether you could marry someone of your same sex. It doesn't mean that you're a homophobe or anything like that. But this is a man of integrity. He's the only one who ever said that presidential candidates had to present their birth certificate, their original birth certificate, a real one, to qualify to run for president. And that didn't just apply to Obama, but anybody, Republican, Democrat. And you've got Sessions now, who took a dive at the Justice Department, who never investigated the political prosecution, I should say persecution, of the Bundys, despite my asking him over and over to do that and him promising to do it. He wants to be senator from Alabama. I'm not telling you who to vote for, but I'm telling you, this is an absolute disgrace that someone like this could be resurrected from the dead. I can tell you, he's no Lazarus. By the way, that's my Hebrew name, Lazarus. Lazer Elia, Larry. And this is something that cannot be permitted in this society, to let someone rise from the dead who's in fact subverted our Constitution and the rule of law. So you need to support Freedom Watch. The reality here is that Freedom Watch now is your private Justice Department. You have no Justice Department. And these clowns like Sessions who think they can go back to the U.S. Senate to pal around with their buddies, to stuff more money into their pocket, they're mistaken. So go to freedomwatchusa.org. Support us. Join our Justice League. You are the superheroes. Now, I'll be back next week with another edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Until then, God bless you and God bless your family.
Hey, I'm Andy. If you don't know me, it's probably because I'm not famous. But I did start a men's grooming company called Harry's. The idea for Harry's came out of a frustrating experience I had buying razor blades. Most brands were overpriced, overdesigned, and out of touch. At Harry's, our approach is simple. Here's our secret. We make sharp, durable blades and sell them at honest prices for as low as $2 each. We care about quality so much that we do some crazy things, like buy a world-class German blade factory. Obsessing over every detail means we're confident in offering a 100% quality guarantee. Millions of guys have already made the switch to Harry's, so thank you if you're one of them. And if you're not, we hope you give us a try with this special offer. Get a Harry starter set with a 5-blade razor, weighted handle, shave gel, and a travel cover. All for just $3 plus free shipping. Just go to harrys.com and enter 5,000 at checkout. That's harrys.com, code 5000. Enjoy!